Up next, a young boy witnesses a terrible crime.
She was gagged. She's been tied. Her hands were tied and everything.
The chief suspect virtually turns himself in.
He appeared exactly like the composite sketch.
We have him with no alibi.
But forensic tests failed to tie him to the crime.
It was not a cheerful day for the prosecution.
I couldn't believe they were going to let him walk to possibly do this to somebody else.
Could forensics provide the answer? The Laurel Village Mobile Home Park in Delaware was home to 32-year-old Kay Robinson, a single mother living with her 11-year-old son.
Laurel is a farming town, and a regular working class person lives there.
One night, around 2 in the morning, Kay was awakened by someone banging on her front door.
Who's there?
She went to the door, look out the window, and see this stranger out there. They said they want to use the telephone. Said their name was Jack Wilson, and they needed a ride. Could they use a telephone?
Kay refused to let Wilson inside.
I think you should leave. You need to go.
Kay Robinson called 911, and the Delaware State Police did respond, but didn't see anything out of the ordinary, so they cleared the scene without any further investigation.
Thinking everything was all right, Kay went back to bed. A half hour later, she was awakened again by a noise in her kitchen. That's when she saw the same man she had seen on her porch in her kitchen, holding a butcher knife. He chased Kay through the house, grabbed her by the arm, put a knife to her throat, and told her to follow his orders. If not, he said he'd kill her son, who was in the adjoining bedroom.
From that point, it was little she could do. It was just completely 3 hours of torture, just horrific torture that she endured.
After sexually assaulting her, the man told Kay that he lived in the same mobile home park and had 2 children. Then he stabbed her almost 30 times and left her for dead. Before leaving, the perpetrator checked on Kay's son, who pretended to be asleep. When the man left the house, Kay's son rushed to their neighbor's house for help.
911, what's your emergency? Yes, my next door neighbor has been robbed and she's been stabbed. It sounded like they might have raped her.
Police arrived to find Kay near death.
Her neck was cut as bad as anyone's neck I've ever seen in my life. She was stabbed several times in her back. It was over 25 times. And her neck was cut basically from side to side.
As Kay was rushed to the hospital, paramedics noticed that her attacker had drawn a smiley face on her back in her own blood.
The smiley face is one of those chilling details of a crime scene that seems to serve no purpose other than to sort of mock or demean the victim of that attack.
You have to know that this person is very sick, very violent, and possibly a serial killer.
Miraculously, despite being stabbed 28 times, Kay survived.
When I woke up, I didn't want to be there. I was furious that I was on life support. My throat was cut in 10 to 15 different places. I basically felt like he was trying to decapitate me. I felt like I was in a horror movie.
They didn't sever her carotid artery or her jugular vein or spinal cord so that she would have been paralyzed or anything like that. She's extremely lucky.
It's just unbelievable, a miracle in my book, and I think everybody felt that way.
Kay not only survived, she said she'd be able to identify her attacker if she ever saw him.
He didn't blindfold me. I was making myself remember every little detail that I could about him, right down to the length of his fingernails.
All police had to do was find him. Kay Robinson will never forget the look on the man's face who mercilessly stabbed her over and over again.
He was asking, "Are you dead yet, bitch?" And when I tried to reply, he continued stabbing me with even more force. I knew right away that I was going to have to pretend to be dead.
This is a very brutal crime. And the way it happened, the random way it happened, and the horrific way it happened, led everybody to start feeling a little bit uneasy and a little bit unsafe.
The intent was to kill. It was not to wound. It was not to leave a mark. It was to kill.
The attacker did something police found highly unusual. He left the bedroom light on throughout the attack, so Kay was able to watch him over an extended period. From her description, police artists created a composite sketch which was released to the media. However, they didn't tell the media about the smiley face drawing the attacker made on Kay's back.
It was not part of any press release. Therefore, this would be something that would only be known to the attacker or be familiar to the attacker.
Kay also said she made a mental record of everything he touched. The man took pains to wipe off his fingerprints, but Kay thought he might have overlooked one of the items, a blue glass.
He drank out of the glass, and then he made a point to take his sleeve and wipe the prints off of the glass, but then grab the glass out of his hand and set it back on the table.
There were several prints on the glass.
We thought it may have been some kind of lubricant used by the perpetrator.
Fearful that the prints might smear or even melt, Hegman placed the glass in a freezer.
The idea to put the tumbler in the freezer was actually to set the print to cause it to become rigid so we could apply powder at some point in time and lift it.
3 full prints were lifted and photographed. 2 weeks after the attack, police were called again to Kay Robinson's home, this time by her neighbors. They said a man drove up to Kay's home, lit a candle, and got down on his knees to pray.
He was very concerned that the person who attacked Kay Robinson be apprehended and wanted to pray for that to happen and to assist police in any way that he could to see that that attacker was apprehended.
The man was 38-year-old Doug DeSilva. In his truck, taped to his windshield, he had a newspaper article about the case with a copy of the attacker's composite sketch.
When he was asked about that, why he had that, he said that he could drive down the road and look for the suspect and keep his eye on the composite at the same time to try to find someone that looked just like that.
But someone did look just like that. Doug DeSilva.
He very distinctly resembled the composite drawing of the suspect in that attack.
DeSilva lived 100 miles away, but his ex-wife and daughter both lived in the same mobile home park as Kay Robinson. A year earlier, he was a suspect in the murder of a 16-year-old girl at a nearby high school.
He was also a person of interest in a murder that had occurred 6 months prior to the attack on Brenda Kay Robinson.
Police brought DeSilva in for questioning. In the middle of the interrogation, he did something very odd. He asked for a job application because he said he wanted to become a state trooper.
We thought maybe that he might even be taunting us at that point. We were very suspicious of that.
Police put together a photo lineup, and Kay Robinson identified DeSilva as the man who attacked her.
She immediately picked him out as the person that was in her house. There was no doubt in her mind.
I know that this is the man that did it. It was more like an internal reaction. So with the physical appearance and that, I was very confident that that was the person that attacked me.
And Kay's son also identified DeSilva.
The man actually came into his room and he was able to see him, but he pretended to be asleep. So he was able to also get a good enough look at the person that he was able to also identify him in a photo lineup.
When De Silva completed his job application to become a policeman, he turned it in. That's when investigators noticed the most bizarre thing they'd ever encountered.
There was a smiley face on the bottom of the document, and that had the same chilling effect on the investigators because they knew that on Kay Robinson's back that the attacker had drawn a smiley face in blood.
Since this detail hadn't been released to the press, investigators were certain they had their man.
Doug De Silva never did deny that he was involved in the Kay Robinson case. He made several statements that he was sorry for what happened to her, wanted to apologize for what happened.
But investigators and Kay Robinson were in for a big surprise. 2 weeks after Kay Robinson's vicious attack, she identified Doug De Silva as her assailant.
From the photo lineup, I was very certain. I wanted to hear him say something to be sure that that was him. When I heard him speak, I thought that that was the person that was in my home.
De Silva had no alibi for the night of the crime.
I've never been so sure in my life as a detective that Doug De Silva was the right person.
De Silva was arrested and charged with the attempted murder of Kay Robinson.
He said to tell her I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do it. I remember going there, but I don't remember stabbing her. To me, that's a confession.
But then came the bad news. De Silva's fingerprints did not match the prints taken from the blue plastic glass in Kay's home.
The fact that we didn't get any fingerprints that matched Doug De Silva's from the scene never led us to believe that he wasn't the suspect, because a lot of times we don't find any fingerprints.
And perhaps the worst piece of news was that De Silva's DNA profile did not match the evidence collected from Kay Robinson's rape kit.
DNA evidence has conclusively ruled out Doug De Silva as being involved in this crime. It was, almost like being struck in the head by a 2x4.
We were extremely shocked. It was like someone had punched you in the stomach.
This was devastating. The investigators, the prosecutors in the case were just flabbergasted, did not know what to do.
In fact, they ran the DNA test twice just to make sure. Again, the DNA didn't match.
And at that point, you can't go forward with the prosecution of Douglas De Silva.
Even though the DNA report said that this wasn't the person that broke into my home, I was still convinced that it was. I couldn't believe they were going to let him walk to possibly do this to somebody else.
So Kay decided to take matters into her own hands.
I bought a gun. I found out where he lived. I went to his house. I sat outside of his home. I wanted to go to the door and knock on the door and just ask him if he remembered me. And I just wanted to take care of it myself.
But Kay thought better of it.
The primary reason was my son. I wanted to raise my son. I didn't want to be in jail.
But if De Silva wasn't the perpetrator, a violent sexual sadist was walking the streets, and police had no new suspects.
I will never be able to understand why a man who was innocent of a crime allowed himself to get so close to the crime and allowed himself to become so suspect.
You go back through your investigation because then you start to doubt yourself a little bit. Did I miss something? Did I overlook something?
Years passed, with no solid leads.
The longer we worked, the colder the case got.
Then, 9 years later, Detective Rob Hudson got a call from detectives 30 miles away in neighboring Maryland.
They had a case that was very similar to the 1995 case with Kay Robinson.
The Maryland victim was a single mother living in a mobile home.
Said she saw a man in her bedroom, and she thought she was dreaming. She saw a knife and a rolling pin in his hand, and he told her he was not going to hurt her if she gave him what he wanted.
The man tied her up, sexually assaulted her, and carried on a lengthy conversation. when she pleaded for her son's life, the man's demeanor changed.
He begged her for forgiveness, and then he gave her some directions to not get up until a certain time and take a shower, and then she was allowed to go to work, but not to call the police.
The man's point of entry, a broken window at the front of the house.
It appeared that he picked the window up after he busted it and set it leaning against the trailer at the base of it.
43-year-old Mark Eskridge was tied to that crime through his fingerprints.
The known standards of one Mark Eskridge were identified to the latent prints that were recovered from the glass from the point of entry from the crime scene.
The Kay Robinson case is similar in many ways. Single mothers in a trailer park with a son, early morning hours, lots of conversation. A knife was used in both.
And Eskridge looked similar to the composite drawing of Kay Robinson's attacker 9 years earlier.
He matched the height, the weight. He had the facial configuration that she had described with the scruffy beard.
Unfortunately, Eskridge's fingerprints did not match the prints on the drinking glass found in Kay Robinson's home. And Kay Robinson said Eskridge wasn't her attacker.
I did tell the detectives that this was not the person.
Would this be yet another dead end? Mark Eskridge was the prime suspect in the rape and attempted murder of Kay Robinson after he committed a similar crime in Maryland. A background check revealed that Eskridge, who was married and had a small child, lived in the same mobile home park as Kay Robinson when the attack occurred.
He lived, in fact, just a few streets away from Kay Robinson. He may have had the opportunity to observe her and know that she resided in that house with her son.
Investigators were sure that Eskridge was their man. But there was only one problem. Kay Robinson was unable to identify Mark Eskridge as her attacker.
That was not the man that broke into my home.
But it had been 9 years since her attack. Memories change, and so did Eskridge's appearance. Fortunately, investigators had the DNA of Kay Robinson's attacker. And when they compared Eskridge's DNA to the biological sample from Kay Robinson's rape test kit, investigators finally got the answer they'd been waiting for.
When I received the call that the DNA was a match, I couldn't believe it. I was overjoyed. I couldn't wait to call Kay Robinson.
I went through a lot of emotions. I thought, oh my God, I'm glad I didn't kill De Silva because it would have been the wrong guy. But, I mean, he could have been his twin. They were identical.
Investigators believe Mark Eskridge targeted Kay Robinson since they lived in the same mobile home park, and he probably knew she was a single mother living alone with her son. Prosecutors think that Eskridge knocked on Kay's door claiming he had car trouble because he wanted to make sure no men were in her home. Later that night, he broke in and attacked. He told Kay that he lived nearby because he had no intention of letting her live. He attacked her repeatedly with a knife, but Kay Robinson's will to survive was too great.
I still had a life to live, and I wanted my life back, and I was going to take it back a piece at a time.
Eskridge left valuable DNA evidence behind, more reliable than any eyewitness. A decade after the crime, Mark Eskridge went on trial for the sexual assault and attempted murder of Kay Robinson. He was convicted and sentenced to life in prison, plus 20 years.
He was a sick individual. I don't believe that you can stab somebody that many times, taunt them, and then spend that much time with them and not have something really, really wrong with you.
Would he be considered a serial rapist, or is he a serial sex predator? I mean, He's a serial something.
Authorities cite the case as a reason to be skeptical of eyewitness identifications, especially when the witness is under extreme duress.
You have an eyewitness identification, which is as certain can be. But you have science and DNA evidence telling you otherwise.
Doug DeSilva's bizarre behavior and his equally bizarre resemblance to the actual attacker almost landed him in jail. Doug DeSilva's whereabouts are unknown, even to his ex-wife.
It's still very, very strange and very puzzling as to why Doug DeSilva had ever gotten involved in the case, why he introduced himself into the case.
You always know somebody's going to get caught or you're going to catch them. It's just you don't know when sometimes.
So I just say, hats off to DNA. This is a great tool. And I tell you, in this case, to be able to free one man and convict another, I say that says a lot for justice.
Up next. Did an intruder commit this brutal murder?
Could this have been even a professional hit?
And was the victim's lifestyle to blame?
When we find nude photographs, what role does she play in this?
But the evidence points in a different direction.
You weren't too smart, Bobby. You got murdered.
The roofing business can be very lucrative. 42-year-old Bob Bosley started his roofing business from scratch in his hometown of Alexandria, Kentucky, and grew it into a multi-million-dollar operation.
Bobby loved to help people. There was a woman that needed some repair work on her roof because it was bad weather, and she was more or less worrying how she was going to pay for it. And he told her, "Ma'am, it's Christmas. Merry Christmas, don't worry about it."
Bob and his wife, Amy, had 2 small children and lived a very comfortable life.
He was very well off. He had nice cars, nice home, loved boats. He had pretty much all the toys that anybody could want.
Until one night, something happened that changed their lives forever. Shortly before dawn, they woke to find an intruder in their bedroom. Shots were fired, and the intruder fled.
Someone is breaking into our house, and my husband...
Stay on the line with me.
During the call, Amy could hear the intruder who was still in the house.
There was a loud thump, and suddenly, Amy wasn't on her end of the phone anymore.
The 911 operator called Amy back.
In the house now?
It took police only minutes to get to the scene.
We found Bob Bosley face down on the mattress, his knees to the floor, kind of in a kneeling position, slumped over the bed, face down, multiple bullet wounds, obviously deceased.
Amy's clothes were torn, and there were abrasions on her chest and behind her ear. The children were unharmed in their bedrooms.
The most horrific part of this crime to me was the fact that it was committed when children were in the home.
Amy described the assailant as a white male about 5 feet 6 inches tall, 170 pounds, with a stocking over his face. She also said he smelled of urine and had a speech impediment.
The house appeared to be ransacked. There were kitchen cabinets open. There were pills that had been strewn all over in the bathroom.
Police found evidence that the crime might have been drug-related.
What caught my attention was the medicine. If someone is going to go through the medicine cabinet, they're obviously looking for drugs, some type of prescribed narcotic.
On the bedroom floor were shell casings from a 9mm handgun. It appeared that the killer entered the house by breaking a window in the back door.
We were looking for something that could have been used to break that window open.
Then investigators found something intriguing.
When we find nude photographs in a safe of a man who's married, he's now deceased, it's something we have to look at. Who is this person? Why does he have nude pictures of her in a safe? What role does she play in this?
The photos gave investigators a whole new set of suspects.
The only thing we've ruled out at this point is the wife. We believe that a subject entered the Bosley residence, was confronted by Mr. Bosley, shot Mr. Bosley, and then exited the residence.
The biggest concern was that there was a murderer on the loose in our county, and we needed to react quickly and find out what happened and where this person might be to make sure that everybody else in our community was safe.
Officials closed the elementary school nearby, and the K-9 unit tried to pick up the killer's scent. An autopsy revealed Bob had been shot 7 times, but only 2 shell casings were found in the bedroom.
When somebody's shot 7 times and we only find 2 shell casings, there's only one explanation. Somebody picked up the shell casings.
Even though the house had been ransacked, the motive didn't appear to be robbery.
There was hundreds of dollars strewn across the floor that had been in a hat with a wallet.
Amy Bosley told police she thought the killer might be one of Bob's clients or employees.
There's times when Bob had disagreements with people. He's pretty nasty. And he's very in their face. You definitely know where he's standing and what he thinks.
He had a high turnover rate. So if someone was fired from his job, a disgruntled employee, that would be another area that we would have to check.
Amy told police about an argument Bob had with his friend Noah Heim just 2 days before the murder.
Noah owed Bob money. He gave him a check for he owed, I think, over $1,000, and he only pays him $200 of it. Big long note. Why he didn't pay the rest of the money. I remember Bobby saying, "You keep around people, you're gonna make friends love."
Noah and Bob grew up together. Bob employed him as a contractor, and Noah served as best man at his wedding. When questioned by police, Noah Heim denied any involvement. He also had an alibi for the night of the murder.
I'd like to get some closure, find out why this happened, why my best friend was murdered in the middle of the night.
Investigators started to doubt whether the killer was someone from work.
He would do anything to help somebody out. One of his workers would come up and say, "Robert, I'm a little low on money this week." And he would just pull out his wallet, pull out a couple $100 bills, and give it to him to pay back whenever you get a chance.
Now investigators turned to the racy photographs they found in Bob's safe. Apparently, Bob Bosley worked hard and played hard. Boat parties on Lake Cumberland were his favorite escape, and he'd take friends, clients, and lots of young women.
Was there nudity? Yeah. A lot of alcohol? Yeah.
It was at one of these parties that Bob met Darla Cope, one of the women in the pictures. She was 10 years younger than Bob, and there were rumors they'd had an affair.
Could there possibly have been a jealous husband? Could there have been an ex-boyfriend? Somebody who was not happy with Bob's involvement with someone in their life?
But Darla told police she had an alibi for the night of the murder.
There was no bad blood. There was no reason for her to commit this crime, nor a jealous boyfriend or husband that would have come in and committed the crime, because of her.
When questioned, Amy Bosley claimed that Bob did most of the partying, but the evidence contradicted that.
She partook in the same type party atmosphere that he did. It wasn't uncommon for her to be on the houseboat with other people, in some sort of state of undress.
There were a lot of rumors surrounding Bob and Amy's relationship in their marriage. I think that people thought that it was possible that both of them were having affairs.
And when police interviewed the Bosleys' children, who were 7 and 10 at the time, they provided some new information about the night of their father's murder.
Amy Bosley's statement was that an intruder broke in through the back door window, came in, shot her husband, and then fled. What the children heard was somewhat quite the opposite. The children heard shots fired and then heard glass breaking after the shots were fired.
Investigators were convinced that the key to finding out who killed Bob Bosley could be found in the evidence at the crime scene.
The police were executing a search warrant on the residence, and one of the areas where they decided to look was in the basement.
There, hidden beneath the stairs, investigators found an aluminum baseball bat with something embedded in the soft aluminum.
The fresh scratches on the bat are important because that represents probably more recent damage. They were shiny with very sharp edges, and they had some fine white powdery material in them.
Forensic examiner Maureen Botrell discovered that the material was glass. Botrell compared it to the glass from the broken window at the crime scene, using what's called the refractive index.
Refractive index is a measure of the speed of light through a transparent object.
The glass is placed in a silicon liquid, then heated. The point where the glass disappears is called its refractive index.
The 5 fragments that had the same refractive index as the fragments that were recovered from the door are consistent with having originated from the door.
They came back with not only the glass fragments that matched the window panes, but also paint and wood samples that were contained within that ball bat, which matched the doorway or the frame of that door.
But where did the bat come from? The Bosleys' children identified it as one of theirs. And it appeared that the glass was broken from inside the house, since most of the glass was outside the door. Investigators found something else hidden in the basement, of all places, inside the clothes washer.
One of the officers found a towel that contained 4 shell casings, and it was rolled up and shoved to the bottom of a washing machine that was full of clothes and water.
And I thought that we had just hit the pay dirt we were looking for in the case.
The casings from the washing machine were compared to the casings found in the bedroom.
I looked at the individual marks that these specimens had. I examined 6 cartridge cases, 4 from the washing machine, 2 from the bedroom. I reached the conclusion that all 6 of these had been fired from the same firearm.
And a closer look at the nightshirt Amy was wearing on the night of the murder revealed an inconsistency.
The shirt that she was wearing appeared to have been torn by the bad guy. Forensic analysis of that T-shirt showed that it, in fact, had been cut through the collar and then pulled apart.
And Amy's injuries looked suspicious too.
Probably with a pair of scissors, in that she scratched her chest.
When questioned by police, Amy denied any involvement.
You know I'm going to ask you this at some point. Did you shoot your husband? No. You know I had asked you that, right?
It's not uncommon for criminals to lie. Happens all the time.
When the Internal Revenue Service heard about Bob Bosley's murder, they called prosecutors with a possible motive. They told police that the Bosley Roofing Company hadn't paid their corporate taxes for the last 5 years and owed the government $1.7 million. Amy was the company's bookkeeper.
Amy would withhold the state income tax, federal income tax, workers' comp, Social Security, those items, but it was never sent to them.
But where was the $1.7 million?
I think that's the $1.7 million question. What did Amy do with the money?
The IRS first met with Amy Bosley. Dissatisfied, they later wanted to meet with Bob too, but Amy wouldn't allow it.
The IRS investigator insisted on talking to Bob. So Amy actually got onto the phone and started talking to this agent. She was disguising her voice, trying to sound like Bob Bosley. And what the investigator told us was that it really sounded like somebody acting like Kermit the Frog.
The IRS asked Amy for her business records, and she promised to comply.
She never provided the information, nor did she arrange a meeting between her husband and these agents.
But there was no indication Bob Bosley knew anything about the tax problem.
We kind of know he didn't know about IRS. I think he would really have a fit if he knew he had owed any money.
She had their income tax returns prepared each year. She actually took them to Bob and had him sign these returns. In his mind, he believed that everything was taken care of.
Amy could put off investigators for only so long. They demanded a meeting with her and Bob for the morning of Bob's murder.
There was no choice. They were coming that morning, and she knew it.
Within a few short hours after her husband had been murdered, Amy had the wherewithal to make a call to that IRS agent. She said, "Sorry, we're not going to be able to meet with you today. Bob's been murdered."
Investigators now believed Amy Bosley murdered her husband because she didn't want him to find out she hadn't paid the income taxes for their roofing business for the last 5 years.
This embezzlement had been going on for quite some time. The figure that we had received from the IRS was that the Bosleys had owed approximately $1.7 million in back taxes and federal liability.
She didn't want to sit down with her husband and explain to him that the business you spent your entire life building, I've destroyed by not paying taxes. They're going to take it all away from me.
Apparently, Amy mistakenly believed that Bob's death would take her off the hook.
Amy thought that because Bob was the owner of the business, that all liability would fall on him, and if he was no longer there was no one to accept that liability.
So if Bob wasn't alive, the chances are that the IRS agents would just quit and go home.
Prosecutors believe that Amy panicked when the IRS demanded a meeting with her husband. Instead of telling Bob what she'd done, Amy chose murder. The night before the IRS meeting, Amy put the children to bed and waited for Bob to fall asleep. She took Bob's 9mm handgun and shot him. Then tried to clean up by picking up the shell casings, although she missed some of them. Amy then ransacked the house to make it look like robbery, broke the glass in the back door, then hid the shell casings in the washing machine. To make it look like there was a struggle, prosecutors believe Amy cut her nightshirt, then scratched herself with the scissors. Then called 911. She gave an all-star performance.
Someone is breaking into our house. Oh my God. I don't know what to do. No, you can't go out there. It's my kids.
This morning at approximately 10:45 a.m., the Campbell County Police Department arrested and charged Amy Bosley with the murder of her husband, Robert Bosley.
But where was the murder weapon?
We have searched by land, we have searched by air, and we have searched by water rescue. There's a pond out there. We dredged the pond to searching for the gun, and we still have not been able to locate the firearm in question.
When police looked at footage of Amy Bosley leaving her home on the night of the murder, they noticed that Amy wasn't carrying her pocketbook. Her sister was. After Amy's arrest, Amy's sister finally got around to looking inside. When she did, she found a 9mm handgun.
Her sister did the appropriate thing. She hired an attorney to turn over this key piece of evidence, and that's how it made it to our office.
She was hoping her sister would chuck it in the river or dispose of it.
Ballistic experts compared the handgun to the shell casings found in the bedroom and inside the washing machine.
They all had class characteristics that were like that produced by the submitted pistol.
My address is 11 842. My name is Amy Bosley.
1 year after Bob's murder, Amy Bosley accepted a plea bargain. She pled guilty to first-degree murder in return for a sentence of 20 years in prison.
I didn't want the kids on the stand because I didn't want to tear them any more apart than they were.
What did Amy do with the money? I don't know if anyone can answer that except for Amy Bosley. I think that $1.7 million probably went to support their lifestyle, probably went to help buy the big boat, to buy the property in Pendleton County, to help build their dream home. I think that over time, their lifestyle might have gotten beyond their means.
Prosecutors believe that Amy Bosley might have hidden some of the money. But where remains a mystery.
Although people disagree in this regard, I think that when Amy gets out, she's probably got some money waiting for her somewhere.
I would really love to know who's got that. I would really love to know.
The Bosleys' children now live with their grandparents. Bob's once thriving business died with him.
It wasn't a good relationship. They were bitter at each other. You had to go way back to find a husband and wife that loved each other in that relationship.
Tragedy upon tragedy, redeemed only by the science that proved who was responsible.
If someone was to actually burglarize a house, they wouldn't take the time to hide the shell casings. They wouldn't take the time to hide the baseball bat. So that just, right there showed that, she was just lying.
By her own actions, Amy made her children witnesses to their father's murder. That, to me, is horrific. The mere fact that we would have to use them as witnesses against their mother was appalling. And she did that. She's the one that did that.
Before we get back to the episode, if you're listening on Spotify, please take a moment to tap 5 stars. It's one of the easiest ways to support Forensic Tales and helps the show reach new listeners. Thank you so much for being here.
To get this episode of Forensic Tales ad-free, please visit patreon.com/Forensic Tales.
Forensic Tales discusses topics that some listeners may find disturbing. The contents of this episode may not be suitable for everyone. Listener discretion is advised.
On a seemingly ordinary evening, March 22nd, 2018, in Springbrook, Wisconsin, Don Sippel's quiet dinner was disrupted by persistent, frantic knocks on his door. Startled, he got up from his kitchen table to see who it was. What he found was beyond comprehension. A distressed 19-year-old woman, barefoot, covered in mud, bruises, bloody, pleading for help. She said she'd been raped and needed 911. Not only was she assaulted, but the bizarre word, boy, was carved into one of her arms. This is Forensic Tales, episode number 208, The Story of Ezra McCandless. Welcome to Forensic Tales. I'm your host, Courtney Fretwell Areola. Forensic Tales is a weekly true crime podcast covering real, spine-tingling stories with a forensic science twist. Some cases have been solved with forensic science, while others have turned cold. Every remarkable story sends us a chilling reminder that not all stories have happy endings. As a one-woman show, your support helps me find new compelling cases, conduct in-depth, fact-based research, and produce and edit this weekly show. You can support my work in 2 simple ways. Become a valued patron at patreon.com/Forensic Tales and leave a positive review. Before we get to this week's episode, we've got 2 new Patreon supporters to thank. Thank you so much to Debbie B. and Bruce C. for becoming the show's newest supporters on Patreon. Now, let's get to this week's episode. On March 22, 2018, Don Sipple was having a quiet dinner inside his Springbrook, Wisconsin home when someone knocked on his front door. When the knocking wouldn't stop, he got up from his kitchen table to see who it was. When he opened the door, a bleeding, distraught 19-year-old female was standing in her socks, begging for help. She was muddy, and her body was covered in bruises and blood. She said she'd been raped and needed 911. Don brought the woman inside, offering her a blanket and get some help. Then he went into the other room to call the police. The call was then routed to the Dunn County, Wisconsin 911 operator. On the call, Don is heard telling the dispatcher, quote, "I have a young lady that just came to my house and somebody attacked her. She has dried blood around her mouth, no shoes, and mud is up to her knees," end quote. Deputies from the Dunn County Sheriff's Office were the first to arrive at the scene. They immediately went to the victim, but she wasn't able to say much. In fact, she wasn't able to tell investigators anything about what happened to her or who attacked her. She just kept saying she was hurt everywhere, but she couldn't remember anything else. All she knew was that she'd been attacked. And she kept asking for someone named Jason Mangle. Even when the cops asked her what her name was, she said she couldn't remember. She also had the word boy carved into her right arm. The police took the woman to the hospital. They still needed to get her side of the story when she eventually calmed down, and they needed to perform a rape kit in order to collect any forensic evidence that might have been left behind from the assault. At the hospital, she kept asking to see this Jason Mangle guy. That's all she really seemed to care about. She either needed to see him or talk to him or both. But before she was allowed to see anyone, the officers needed a statement from her. So they continued to press her about what happened and who attacked her, or who carved the word boy on her arm. But she just kept saying she couldn't remember. She couldn't even remember her own name. She just knew someone had raped her, and she ran to Don Sipple's farmhouse to get help. That's it. It wasn't until later that night, when she was at the hospital taking a shower, that her memory started to come back to her. In that moment, she knew who had done this to her, who raped her and carved boy into her arm. Her ex-boyfriend, Alex Woodworth. She also remembered her name, Ezra McCandless. Right away, the police got to work trying to hunt down this Alex Woodworth guy. They called his house, but no answer. They showed up at the coffee place where he worked. He wasn't there either. In fact, no one had heard from Alex since earlier that day. So maybe he was on the run after the attack. The police continued to search for Alex the following day. And while they searched around Don Sipple's farmhouse, they spotted something. They found several bloody footprints on the ground that led up to a hill behind the house. When they followed the footprints, it led them to a dirt road where they found a car that looked like it had become stuck in the dirt. As they got closer, they saw there was a body hanging out of the back seat. It was Alex Woodworth, her ex-boyfriend, who she said attacked her and carved the word boy into her forearm the day before. But why was he the one dead? Alex was found in a silver 2003 Chevy Impala, but it wasn't your typical Impala. The police immediately knew that it was Ezra's car because she used it as her own personal paint canvas. As an aspiring artist, she had painted a picture of a bird riding a bicycle on the top of the roof. So there was no question that it was Ezra's car. But why was her attacker dead inside of her own car? Wasn't Alex the one who attacked Ezra? The scene was as bad as it comes, and starkly different from your typical sexual assault type attack. But the detectives didn't know much. All they had was a basic narrative that Ezra had given them at the hospital. But here's what the scene looked like. Not only was Alex found slumped over in the back seat, but it looked like he was trying to get inside all the way so that he could drive away. He also had a scarf tied around his neck, like he had used it to try and stop the bleeding. And speaking of bleeding, when Alex's body was eventually removed from the car, investigators discovered that he had a total of 16 stab wounds on his body. He had stab wounds everywhere: his head, neck, groin, and torso. But oddly enough, he didn't have any defensive wounds. He didn't have a single cut to any of his hands, fingers, or forearms. Not surprisingly, given the amount of stab wounds, there was blood everywhere. Blood inside the car. Bloody footprints were all around the outside of the vehicle parked in the dirt. Even Alex's body was covered in what investigators believed was his own blood. The scarf around his neck and the sweater he wore were also completely drenched in blood. But something about the blood evidence seemed off to detectives, or at least it didn't seem to match up with Ezra's story. Instead of finding most of the blood inside the car, they found a lot more blood outside. Like Ezra and Alex had been involved in some type of struggle or fight outside of the car, not inside. When detectives took a step back and looked at everything as a whole, they knew there had to be more to this story. A lot more happened than a typical sexual assault. Once she was released from the hospital, Ezra was brought down to the Dunn County Police Station for more questioning. By this point, Ezra seemed like an entirely different person than she had been when she first showed up at Don Sippel's farmhouse the day before. She had finally remembered who she was and said she knew exactly what happened to her and why Alex Woodworth ended up dead. So this was really the first time the police could get the entire story. Now here's what she had to say during this first police interview. According to Ezra, March 22nd, 2018, the day of the attack, started as an ordinary day. After she woke up, she wrote in her daily journal. After that, she logged onto her parents' computer to check some emails. And then she fed her dog and cat before showering and getting dressed. The plan for that day was to go to Alex's place to return some items to him. They were some things that Alex had given to her when they were dating. But after the breakup, Ezra said that the items made her feel sad. So later that day, she planned to go to his house and drop the items off. Ezra told investigators she needed to be back at her dad's house by 5:00 p.m. that evening to watch his stepson. So the plan wasn't to be gone long. Ezra said she went over to Alex's house and the two talked briefly in his living room. After that, they decided to go for a drive inside Ezra's car so that they could keep talking. But at some point during this drive, their conversation took a turn. According to Ezra, after they parked in a remote spot so that they could talk some more, Alex pulled out a knife and jumped on top of her. She said she had never seen him this upset or this angry before, so she knew she was in trouble. She sensed Alex had driven her out there to that remote spot to kill her. Then Alex started using the knife to cut away at her clothes. He was going to rape her. But before she let that happen, she grabbed the knife from Alex's hands and in the process cut her own hand. Then Ezra said she started stabbing Alex in self-defense. It was either going to be him or her. She took control of the knife and started stabbing him. She just kept stabbing until she could get out of the car and run away. By 4:30 p.m. that afternoon, Ezra found herself at Don Sippel's front door, and that's when the police were called. She said she had no idea if Alex was still alive or not. She just knew she needed to get away and get help. After getting Ezra's story, detectives still needed to figure out how she got the word boy carved into her left forearm. Here's what she said. Ezra said she experienced some gender identity issues several years ago in high school. At one point, she wasn't even sure how she wanted to be identified, either as a boy or a girl. She didn't even know how to identify herself. And she thought that maybe Alex probably picked up on that too. So he wrote the word boy on her arm, basically making fun of her gender identity issues. Although she still identified as a girl, the gender that she was assigned at birth, Alex saw her more as a boy than a girl. But the location of the word boy on Ezra's left arm didn't make sense. It was on her left forearm. According to Ezra's story, Alex did it when he was sitting in the right driver's seat side, and she was in the passenger seat. Alex was also right-handed. So for him to write the word boy perfectly into her left forearm while sitting in the right driver's seat, he would have had to have written it backward. When Ezra first spoke to the police in front of Dawn Sippel's house, she kept asking for someone named Jason Mangle. So who was this Jason guy? According to Ezra, Jason Mangle was another ex-boyfriend of hers. The two of them met and started dating about 10 months before Alex had attacked her. And interestingly enough, Alex Woodworth and Jason Mangle were also friends. Ezra and Jason met in the summer of 2017 at Racy's Coffee Shop, the same place where Alex worked as a barista. According to both Ezra and Jason, the two of them instantly had a connection. Even though there was a significant age gap, Jason was 33 and Ezra was only 19 when they met. They both said the age difference didn't matter. Their relationship was so serious that Ezra moved into Jason's apartment after only about a month of dating, and they even talked about getting married. Jason would often call Ezra his wife, and she would refer to him as her husband. As far as their relationship went, it had its fair share of issues, so it wasn't all rainbows and butterflies. Not only was Jason significantly older than Ezra, but he was also more stable. At the time, he worked as a medic for the Army Reserve, which meant that he would be gone for a couple of weekends out of each month. Ezra, on the other hand, was more of a free spirit. She was the type of girl who would often break into old and abandoned buildings so that she could take photos. She was also the type to not shy away from her creative side. She even used her car as a personal paint canvas when she painted a picture on it. When she met Jason Mangle, she was unemployed and had dropped out of college. She moved to Eau Claire, the city where she met Jason at Racy's Coffee Shop, to start a new life for herself. So they were both in vastly different stages of their lives in the summer of 2017. Sometime during the late summer of 2017, Ezra was introduced to Alex Woodworth. Alex worked as a barista at Racy's Coffee Shop in Eau Claire, and Jason and Ezra were regular customers. Racy's Coffee Shop was a popular hangout spot for those living in Eau Claire. It was a spot that attracted many different people with different interests. So while hanging out at Racy's, Jason and Ezra both became friends with Alex. When they all met and became friends, Alex was 23 years old. Besides working part-time at Racy's, he also worked as a substitute teacher, dreaming of becoming a philosophy professor someday. He was said to love philosophy so much that he never stopped talking about it. He would talk about philosophy with anyone who would listen to him. He always had it on his mind. Alex was also a big family guy. As the oldest of 4 siblings, he grew up incredibly close to his siblings and parents. If he wasn't substitute teaching or working at Racy's Coffee Shop, he was either at church or spending time with his family. He was also described as a deeply caring person who wanted to take care of creatures that most people didn't, like strange bugs and spiders. This same caring sentiment also translated to the people that he met. He never met a person he didn't like. So when Ezra was introduced to Alex in late 2017, she instantly became someone that Alex really cared about. According to Ezra, her friendship with Alex turned romantic sometime in November 2017. Even though she was still dating and living with Jason Mangle, she started dating Alex on the side. But not long after that, Jason found out about the relationship and felt incredibly betrayed. Not only was his girlfriend cheating on him, but Alex Woodworth was also his close friend. The three of them had all become incredibly close that year. So it was a double betrayal for Jason. After Jason found out Ezra was cheating, they broke up. Ezra moved out of the apartment, and she also broke up with Alex Woodworth. But the breakup didn't mean that Jason and Ezra stopped talking. In fact, it was the exact opposite. After they broke up, they continued to see each other and hang out through the end of 2017 and the start of 2018. In February 2018, Jason left for a military training camp for 2 weeks. And during that time, something happened between Ezra and another one of Jason's close friends, a guy named John Hansen. Within a few days of returning from military training, Jason found text messages on Ezra's cell phone between her and his friend John Hansen. The messages suggested that they had seen each other and may have slept together while Jason was away at the 2-week training. But when Jason confronted Ezra about it, she said the encounter wasn't consensual and she accused John Hansen of rape. So on February 25th, 2018, Jason went to the police department with Ezra to file a police report. Even though John was one of Jason's best friends at the time, he wanted to support Ezra. So Ezra told the police that one night while Jason was away with the military, she hung out with one of his best friends, John Hansen. She said John kept giving her alcohol, and at one point, she started to black out from drinking so much. Then he took her upstairs and raped her. She said she was too drunk to stop it or get him off of her, so a sexual assault took place. She was adamant with investigators that it was not consensual and that she believed that John had got her drunk and took advantage of her. But Ezra's rape story had a lot of holes in it, starting with the police's interview with Alex Woodworth. On March 3rd, 2018, the police interviewed Alex about Ezra's claim, but according to him, Ezra had told him that she willingly had sex with John while Jason was away, but she ultimately regretted it. The police also searched John's cell phone, which showed text messages between him and Ezra, proving even more that their interaction was in fact consensual. They read flirty text after text between them, all suggesting that they planned to have sex that night. They also seemed to be making plans to meet up in the future. So after speaking with Alex Woodworth and going through John Hansen's cell phone, the police dropped Ezra's rape charge. They didn't think she was sexually assaulted and believed that the whole thing was consensual. Ezra went from looking like an innocent rape victim to a complete liar, someone who accused John Hansen of raping her simply because she regretted it after her ex-boyfriend, Jason Mangle, found out about it. 2 weeks later, Alex Woodworth was found dead. When Ezra provided detectives with her initial account of what happened between her and Alex on March 22nd, they went back to the crime scene. And as they looked at it again, they found even more inconsistencies in her story. First was Alex's body. His official cause of death was determined to be sharp force injury to the head, and the medical examiner ruled his death a homicide. But a lot of things about Alex's body didn't align with Ezra's story about self-defense. For one, the sheer number of stab wounds was, well, it was strange. Alex was stabbed 16 times. That's a lot for self-defense. Plus, none of Alex's injuries were considered fatal in and of themselves. This meant that he likely didn't die right away. In fact, he probably suffered and didn't die until he eventually lost too much blood. That explains why the scarf was found around his neck. He probably used it to try and stop the bleeding. He also likely tried to get help. And if he had gotten help relatively quickly, he probably could have survived. But there was no way for him to call for help. When Ezra ran away to Don Sippel's farmhouse, she took Alex's cell phone with her. She told detectives she took the cell phone so that she could call for help. But when she was running away, she accidentally fell, landed on the cell phone, and broke it. So she was never able to call for help. And Alex, well, he couldn't call for help because she took his phone. It's also important to mention here that at the time, Ezra didn't have a cell phone of her own. So the only phone she had with her that night was Alex's. Ezra's own injuries from that night were also inconsistent with her original story. Dr. Tilliston, who treated Ezra in the emergency room that night, told investigators her injuries looked more like they were self-inflicted, not caused by anyone else. Then what about the word boy that was carved into her arm? Well, detectives were already convinced that Alex wasn't the one who did it. In fact, they believed Ezra had done it to herself. They just didn't know why. Forensic evidence at the crime scene was also telling to investigators. In the police reports, they all noted that the majority of the blood evidence was found outside of the car, not inside. This was a big contradiction to Ezra's story because she claimed she was attacked in the back seat of the car. But there was virtually no blood found in the back seat. Most of the blood was just outside of the car, suggesting that that's where Alex had been stabbed. Alex himself also didn't have any defensive wounds. Wouldn't you think someone who's being stabbed 16 different times would at least have some amount of defensive wounds, either on his arms or hands? Well, he didn't have any. Finally, there were inconsistencies in Ezra's timeline. Based on when the medical examiner believed Alex was killed and the time that Ezra showed up on Don Sippel's front doorstep, way too much time had passed. So this led investigators to speculate whether Ezra used that time to stage the scene and the attack. Detectives also interviewed Jason Mangle, and he was able to fill in even more gaps. According to Jason, he saw Ezra a few hours before the alleged attack happened. He told investigators that Ezra showed up at Racy's coffee shop completely unannounced earlier that day. Even though they had exchanged 500 text messages the night before, she never mentioned she planned to return to Eau Claire or Racy's that morning. Jason's first thought was that Ezra didn't seem like herself when she showed up at Racy's. She seemed agitated or angry. When he asked her what she was doing back in Eau Claire, she said she planned to go to Alex's house to talk and drop off a few things she didn't want anymore. So after chatting briefly, Jason said she left to go to Alex's. But something about how she was acting just didn't quite sit right. She didn't seem like the person he had known for the last 10 months and once dated. So he decided to follow Ezra to Alex's house. When he got to Alex's, he saw her car parked outside, and he said that he waited there for about 45 minutes. Eventually, he went inside the house to make sure that everything was okay between Alex and Ezra. He remembered that when he got inside, he saw the two of them sitting together on the couch and that they both seemed like they were in the middle of a deep conversation. So he said he turned around, walked outside of the house, but that's when he was confronted by the Eau Claire Police Department. One of Alex's neighbors, who saw Jason pacing back and forth in front of the house, thought that he looked a little too suspicious, so they decided to call the police. Jason then explained to officers that he rode his bike to Alex's house because he was concerned about his ex-girlfriend Ezra, who was also inside. He said she seemed really upset and wasn't acting like herself, so he decided to go there to make sure that everything was okay. So after speaking with Jason, the police officers decided that everything was fine. and they left without taking any type of official police report. This was the last time Jason saw his friend, Alex Woodworth, alive, because just a few short hours later, he was dead, and Ezra was at Dawn Sippel's front door, claiming she had been attacked. Over the next 2 weeks, the police took a hard look at all the evidence they had and all the inconsistencies. From 16 stab wounds, to the lack of defensive wounds on Alex, to the emergency room doctor's belief that Ezra's injuries were self-inflicted, to the word boy written on her arm that she wrote herself, to the blood found outside of the car instead of inside, to the false rape allegation that Ezra had made about another one of Jason Mangle's friends, John Hansen, to Alex's cell phone so that he couldn't call for help. Detectives even discovered that the knife used to stab Alex didn't belong to him at all. It belonged to Ezra's father. Her dad had told detectives that he had given her some of his knives in the past. So it was Ezra herself who brought the knife that day. All of the evidence pointed in one direction: Ezra McCandless. 2 weeks after the alleged attack, Ezra was arrested on charges of first-degree intentional homicide on April 6, 2018, the highest charge possible in the state of Wisconsin. At this point, investigators believed they had put together the timeline of what actually happened that day. They believed Ezra planned the entire thing after Alex told the police about her consensual encounter with one of Jason Mangle's best friends, John Hansen. Alex was essentially the one who led the police to drop the rape charges. She also thought Alex was in the way of her getting back with Jason, even though she was the one who also slept with Alex while still dating and living with Jason. The police believed she considered Alex the reason why Jason wasn't getting back together with her. So, to seek revenge, she went to Alex's house that day, armed with one of her father's knives, with the intent to lure him to a secluded area inside her car. Once she found a spot, the police believed Ezra was the one who first started attacking Alex, not the other way around like she originally claimed. One of Alex's stab wounds was to the back of his head, so that told investigators she probably caught him completely off guard. That also explains why he didn't have any defensive wounds. Basically, he had no idea that the attack was about to happen. After stabbing Alex 16 times, the police believed Ezra went on to stage the entire crime scene. She ripped her own clothes to make it look like Alex had used the knife on her. She carved the word boy into her arm, which she later admitted that she actually did. She took his cell phone so that he had no way of calling for help. And the police even believe she tried to get Alex's body back inside the car so that she could drive away and dump his body somewhere else. That explains why his body was found half inside and half outside of the car. But the police don't think Ezra was physically able to do it, so she abandoned her original idea and went to John Sippel's house instead. Once she was in front of detectives, the lies about the whole situation started pouring out of her mouth. At first, she came across as an innocent victim. But the more the police looked at the crime scene and the forensic evidence, the more inconsistencies and lies they found in her story. 18 months after her arrest, Ezra was on trial for first-degree intentional homicide. If convicted, she faced spending the rest of her life behind bars. But she was determined not to let that happen. When she showed up on the first day of the trial, she looked like a completely different person. She didn't look like a cold-blooded killer that the police and prosecution was going to argue. Instead, she looked like an innocent 20-year-old girl. Her hair was down, she had barely any makeup on, and she came to court dressed in a pink blazer. In front of the jury, she looked completely innocent and naive. Again, nothing like a cold-blooded killer. The biggest witness for the prosecution was Ezra's ex-boyfriend, Jason Mangle. Not only did he testify to their 8-month-long relationship, but he also told the jury about he was the one who introduced Alex Woodworth and Ezra in the first place. He also testified about how she had cheated on him not only once with Alex, but twice with his best friend, John Hansen, who she later accused of rape. His testimony painted a conniving portrait of the real Ezra, a cheating, selfish liar driven by jealousy to murder Alex Woodworth. Against the advice of almost every criminal defense lawyer, Ezra took the stand in her own defense. When she testified, she wore a green sweater that Jason Mangle had given her as a gift. As expected, Ezra looked every bit like the victim in this case. She stuck to her original self-defense story, and she testified that she didn't want to kill Alex, but it was either him or her. So she's sorry, but it had to be him. But her story changed once again when she got on the stand. Initially, she told detectives she grabbed the knife from Alex when he started cutting her clothes. But at trial, she said she first was able to knee him in the groin, and that's when he dropped the knife and she was able to pick it up. Now, this is a small difference, but the prosecution saw it as yet another inconsistency. The prosecution argued Ezra stabbed Alex in hopes of preventing him from getting in the way of her rekindling her relationship with Jason. They also said she was angry about him telling the police about having sex with John Hansen. He was the one who essentially caused all the charges to be dropped, and basically after that, Ezra was labeled as a liar. But the defense claimed Alex was the angry one, not Ezra. They claimed Alex was furious that Ezra didn't want to be with him anymore and instead wanted to be with Jason. So he was the aggressor, and she had no choice but to act in self-defense to save her own life. If he hadn't forced himself upon her, this would have never happened. When it came to Ezra's memory loss right after the attack happened, the defense hired an expert to testify that she was likely under a lot of stress. Sometimes, people under a lot of stress can have difficulty remembering the crime. So when the police showed up and she couldn't remember what happened or who she was, that's probably what happened. Her defense attorney argued that she wasn't trying to intentionally mislead investigators about what happened, she just couldn't remember. The prosecution, however, said that that was entirely made up. They don't believe she experienced any type of actual memory loss. According to them, it was all Ezra's way of trying to get away with murder. It was simply convenient memory loss. The jury learned who Ezra was from both sides, the prosecution and her defense. Not only did the defense want to make her look innocent, but they also told the jury about her upbringing, how she was actually born with the name Monica Carlin, not Ezra McCandless, and she was born in Stanley, Wisconsin. Her mom gave birth to her when she was only 14 years old. So her childhood and life were troubled from the start. When she was in high school, she suffered from gender identity issues. She didn't know whether she was a girl or boy. By the time she was 18, she moved to Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and changed her name to Ezra McCandless, after a character from Into the Wild. But for the prosecution, Ezra was a jealous young girl who would do anything, including murder, to get what she wanted. Every day throughout the 2-week trial, Ezra dressed in a completely different, colorful outfit and wore different hairstyles. Even when she wasn't on the stand, it looked like she was trying to draw attention to herself. She was trying to look as innocent as possible. She hoped that somehow her timidness could convince the jury that this was self-defense. But she was wrong. The jury didn't buy it. After a few hours of deliberation, they returned with a guilty verdict on November 1st, 2019. They found Ezra guilty of first-degree intentional homicide for the killing of 24-year-old Alex Woodworth. As the verdict was read, Ezra looked like she was in complete shock and about to faint. It looked like she'd never considered the possibility that the jury wouldn't believe her. 3 months later, on February 7th, 2020, Ezra was ordered back to court. This time, it was for her sentencing hearing. She was sentenced to life in prison with eligibility for parole after serving at least 50 years. If she's ever released and granted parole, she would be in her 70s. The only time Ezra was said to have shown remorse was at her sentencing hearing. Throughout the trial, she never shed a tear or expressed any type of remorse for what happened. She only seemed to show any kind of emotion after she was sentenced to life in prison. She spoke at the hearing, saying in part, quote, "I want to say how sorry I am that they have lost their son, but sorry doesn't cut it in my mind. I loved Alex so much, and I also feel a great loss, and I'm so sorry," end quote. But by that point, it was too late. Judge James Peterson, the judge who sentenced Ezra, even made a point of saying that he didn't feel like her courtroom apology was sincere. It was too little, too late. Not long after she was taken to prison to start serving her sentence, Alex Woodworth's father publicly forgave Ezra for what she did to his eldest son. In his statement, he said, quote, "I've been forgiven, so I forgave her. It's just that simple. Hate's like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die," end quote. Alex's family wants him to be remembered for the nice and kind person that he was. According to them, he was someone who everyone loved, and Alex always wanted everyone to smile. They don't want him to only be remembered for how he was murdered. Today, Ezra is serving her life sentence in an all-female Wisconsin prison facility. Although she was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole, she must serve at least 50 years of that sentence to ever be considered for release. Although the exact motive behind Alex Woodworth's murder might not fully be understood, jealousy is believed to have been a major factor. Ezra killed Alex because he was in the way of her relationship with Jason Mangle. Important forensic evidence collected at the crime scene led investigators to the truth about what really happened on March 22, 2018. The blood found outside of the car completely contradicted where Ezra said she was attacked. The lack of defensive wounds on Alex's body suggested he was surprised by the stabbing. And the word boy carved into Ezra's arm was her own doing. Ezra McCandless wasn't a victim like she wanted everyone else to believe. Based on the forensic evidence, she was a jealous, cold-blooded killer. To share your thoughts on the story, be sure to follow the show on Instagram and Facebook. To find out what I think about the case, sign up to become a patron at patreon.com/forensictales. After each episode, I release a bonus episode where I share my personal thoughts and opinions about the case. Don't forget to subscribe to Forensic Tales so you don't miss an episode. We release a new episode every Monday. If you love the show, consider leaving us a positive review or tell friends and family about us. You can also help support the show through Patreon. Thank you so much for joining me this week. Please join me next week. We'll have a brand new case and a brand new story to talk about. Until then, remember, not all stories have happy endings. Forensic Tales is a Rockefeller audio production. The show is written and produced by me, Courtney Fretwell Areola. For a small monthly contribution, You can help create new compelling cases for the show, help fund research, and assist with production and editing costs. For supporting the show, you'll become one of the first to listen to new ad-free episodes and snag exclusive show merchandise not available anywhere else. To learn about how you can support the show, head over to our Patreon page, patreon.com/forensictales, or simply click the support link in the show notes. You can also support the show by leaving a positive review or telling friends and family about us. Forensic Tales is a podcast made possible by our Patreon producers, Tony A., Nicole G., Christine B., Karen D., Nancy H., Sherry A., Michael D., Nicola, Jerry M., Brian W., Natasha K., Jerry L., and Megan G. If you'd like to become a producer of the show, head over to our Patreon page or send me an email at Courtney@forensictales.com to find out how you can become involved. For a complete list of sources used in this episode, please visit forensictales.com. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next week. Until then, remember, not all stories have happy endings. Before we get back to the episode, if you're listening on Spotify, please take a moment to tap 5 stars. It's one of the easiest ways to support Forensic Tales and helps the show reach new listeners. Thank you so much for being here.
To get this episode of Forensic Tales ad-free, please visit patreon.com/forensictales.
Forensic Tales discusses topics that some listeners may find disturbing. The contents of this episode may not be suitable for everyone. Listener discretion is advised.
A young college student was found murdered inside her North Carolina off-campus apartment in September 2012. But from the beginning, the authorities were very tight-lipped about their investigation. And the more they released about what was going on, the more questions everyone had about what happened to Faith Hedgepeth. This is Forensic Tales, episode number 163. The Murder of Faith Hedgepeth. Welcome to Forensic Tales. I'm your host, Courtney Fretwell Areola. Forensic Tales is a weekly true crime podcast covering real, spine-tingling stories with a forensic science twist. Some cases have been solved with forensic science, while others have turned cold. Every remarkable story sends us a chilling reminder that not all stories have happy endings. As a one-woman show, your support helps me find new compelling cases, conduct in-depth, fact-based research, and produce and edit this weekly show. As a thank you for supporting the show, you'll get early ad-free access to weekly episodes, shout-outs in episodes, priority on case suggestions, and access to weekly bonus episodes. To support Forensic Tales, please visit patreon.com/forensictales, or simply click the link in the show notes. You can also support this show by leaving a positive rating with a review. Now, let's get to this week's episode. On the morning of Friday, September 7th, 2012, students at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill were shocked to learn a fellow UNC student had died. But it wasn't only that a student had passed away that left everyone on edge. It was because the student was murdered inside of her off-campus apartment. Word spread quickly throughout the University of North Carolina campus about the murder of 19-year-old Faith Hedgepeth. Originally from Hollister, North Carolina, Faith was a sophomore at the university. Her parents were Ronald and Connie Hedgepeth, and she had an older sister, Rolanda, who was 18 when Faith was born. Faith's parents divorced when she was only a year old, so she was primarily raised by her mom and older sister. Their significant age difference meant that Rolanda, her older sister, was more like a second mother to her. She was given the name Faith because her mom, Connie, believed it was what she needed to raise her. She already had 2 sons and an older daughter. By the time Faith was 1, she had become a single mom. At the time of her murder in 2012, Faith was in her 2nd year at the UNC Chapel Hill campus on a Gates Millennial Scholarship. This scholarship, established by billionaire Bill Gates, awards high-achieving minority students with money to attend college. Many students who receive this scholarship money, like Faith, wouldn't have the financial means to attend college otherwise. So this money was a huge deal for Faith and her family. She was also incredibly deserving of the money. Throughout high school, she maintained an almost perfect grade point average. She was also a cheerleader and participated in many after-school programs and activities. Besides receiving money from the scholarship, Faith also worked part-time at the Red Robin restaurant near the Durham border to help pay for things like groceries and gas. If Faith had graduated from UNC, she would have become the first person in her family to graduate with a degree. After college, she had dreams of becoming a pediatrician, but that dream never came to be. The news about Faith's murder rocked the UNC Chapel Hill campus and its community. Chapel Hill is a relatively safe place to be, and no one could think of a single person who would want to kill Faith. She was described as an outgoing and intelligent young lady. She was also known for her love of helping people. That's probably why she wanted to become a pediatrician someday, so that she could continue to take care of people. In the early days of the investigation, the Chapel Hill police were tight-lipped about the case. All they said was that Faith had been found dead inside her off-campus apartment between Durham and Orange counties, and it wasn't an accident. She had been murdered just days shy of her 20th birthday. But other than that, the police didn't say much. They wouldn't say how she was murdered or what the exact cause of death was. They also wouldn't say if they had any suspects. This type of secrecy was completely out of character for Chapel Hill PD. They weren't the type of law enforcement agency known to keep investigations highly secret. But there was something about this particular case that felt different. And they argued that it was in the best interest of the investigation to keep everything under seal. So not even Faith's family was kept updated about the case. 2 months after the murder, the Daily Tar Heel, the UNC Chapel Hill's student newspaper, filed a petition to unseal some case documents related to the investigation. By November, the public and media were frustrated that the police just weren't saying anything about what happened or where the investigation was headed. Everyone, except for the Chapel Hill Police Department, seemed to be in the dark. All they knew was Faith had been murdered and no one had been arrested yet. But instead of releasing anything related to the case, the judge in the matter ordered that all documents related to Faith's murder remain under seal for at least another 45 days. This meant that the media and public wouldn't know anything for at least another month and a half. 4 months later, this is now January, the police finally revealed some key details about their investigation. They confirmed that Faith's killer's DNA was found at the scene, and the DNA belonged to a male. But they wouldn't say exactly where the DNA was found or who it belonged to. They also announced the FBI was called to assist the Chapel Hill Police Department in creating a profile of the suspect. The FBI speculated that Faith's killer had likely expressed interest in her in the past. Maybe he had approached her or even asked her out on a date. The FBI also said his behavior has probably changed following the murder. So people around him might notice that he started acting differently. He might even start to show an unusual interest in Faith's case. Now, following this announcement in January, the public and media were hopeful that they would disclose more details about the case. But they didn't. The Chapel Hill Police Department and the FBI were determined to keep their investigation a secret. And in May 2013, the court extended another seal on all documents related to the case for an additional 60 days. By the first anniversary of Faith's murder, the public and media were desperate for answers. For over a year, 12 long months, the police had left them in the dark. All everyone knew was that the case was still open and no one had been arrested. By September 2013, word was leaked to the media that the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation was being brought in to help, but that was it. No one knew what they were called in to do or where the investigation was headed. After that, another full year passed without almost complete silence by the police. By 2014, the media submitted another petition to the court to release case documents. This time the petition was headed by the Tar Heel, the UNC student newspaper, the Raleigh News and Observer, and Capital Broadcasting Company. By that point, they were desperate to find out what was going on and why the police weren't talking. The media felt like the police were hiding stuff about Faith's case, like maybe hiding sloppy police work, or they didn't want anyone to know the case had turned cold and they weren't really doing anything to try and solve it. In an article published by the Tar Heel, a lawyer for the newspaper had this to say, quote, 18 months goes by, and no one's been charged and no one's been arrested. The public has the right to assume the trail has gone cold, or it's not being investigated in a diligent manner, end quote. Over the next few months, media outlets all over North Carolina published articles criticizing the Chapel Hill Police, the FBI, and the State Bureau of Investigation. Without any official documents to review, all they could write about were their assumptions about the case. One article talked about how two of Faith's neighbors who lived in the same apartment building said the police never asked to search their apartments. They said investigators only searched Faith and Karina, her roommate's apartment, but they didn't seem interested in anyone else living there. These neighbors also said that they never saw detectives canvass the neighborhood or speak to anyone. So these statements led many people to speculate whether the Chapel Hill Police Department had done a good enough investigation, and this went on for months. The media kept writing about things that they could only speculate about because nothing was being officially released or made public. Then by July 2014, almost 2 years after the murder, the court ordered the case records to be unsealed. Finally, the public and media got some of the answers that they had been searching for. The public learned that at the time of her murder, Faith lived at the Hawthorne at the View apartment complex. It was a popular off-campus student housing building between Chapel Hill and Durham. She shared the one-bedroom apartment with another UNC student, Karina Rosario. Faith and Karina had met and become friends when they were both freshmen. Then they moved in together to save some money. The plan was for Faith and Karina to share the one-bedroom space until Faith received her financial aid money. Once she got the money, she hoped to move to another apartment where she would have a little bit more space, and she wouldn't have to share a one-bedroom. Before they started living together, Karina was dating a guy named Eric Jones, but their relationship was far from ideal. Karina and Eric reportedly had a very toxic relationship, and the relationship had turned abusive. At one point, Karina had even taken out a restraining order against him after she ended the relationship and moved out. In July 2012, Eric tried 2 different times to break into the apartment where Faith and Karina lived, even after she changed the locks. So she felt like she needed the restraining order because he simply wouldn't leave her alone. With the order in effect, Eric wasn't allowed to see Karina or go near the apartment. The Chapel Hill investigators learned that Faith was the one who drove Karina to the courthouse to file the paperwork for the restraining order. She was essentially the one who convinced Karina it was time to make sure that he couldn't see her or go to the apartment. So the investigators wondered if Eric could have had something to do with Faith's murder. Not only did Eric not like Faith because she took Karina to get the restraining order against him, but he also felt like she had a lot of influence over Karina. And he felt like she was a big reason why Karina decided to end things with him. According to investigators, at one point, Eric threatened Faith over the phone, saying that he would kill her if he wasn't allowed to go to the apartment and see Karina. This all happened in the weeks and months leading up to Faith's murder. So the investigators wondered if this could be the motive for murder. If he didn't like Faith and had tried at least 2 times in the summer to break into the apartment. According to the police reports, by September 2012, the only person the Chapel Hill police could identify as someone who didn't like Faith was Eric Jones. As the public waited to learn more about the case, the Chapel Hill police were putting together a timeline of Faith's last known whereabouts, and more information about the case was slowly being leaked to the media. Over the next several months, the Chapel Hill police released what they believed was the timeline of her murder. Around 8 p.m. the night of September 6, 2012, Faith and her roommate Karina went to Davis Library, the student library on the UNC campus. According to Karina, they were there to study for upcoming exams. While at the library, Faith texted her dad about possibly joining a sorority on campus. After studying together for a little while, Faith left the library for a bit, but she returned later on to pick Karina up so that they could head back to their apartment. Faith and Karina left Davis Library around 11:30 p.m. and were back at the apartment around 12 midnight. Chapel Hill investigators disclosed that the Hawthorne at the View apartment building was situated at the end of a road, and there was only one way into the complex and one way out. The building was almost entirely surrounded by trees, which meant that Faith and Karina's second-floor apartment was really difficult to see from the entrance. According to Karina, when they got inside the apartment, they locked the front door behind them and started getting ready to go out for the night. They were inside the apartment for about 30 minutes before they left together around 12:30 a.m. About 10 minutes later, they arrived at Thrill Nightclub, a popular club in the area for UNC students. One of the reasons why it was a popular spot for undergrad students was because this particular nightclub allowed people under 21 inside. For many students like Faith and Karina, it was a fun spot to hang out with other young people and go dancing. Video evidence captured Karina walking out of Thrill at 2:06 a.m. By that time, it was September 7th. Later, Karina told investigators she left the club a little before closing time because she wasn't feeling well, and she wanted to head back to the apartment and go to sleep for the night. A few minutes later, after the camera captured Karina leaving the club, Faith was also seen leaving. This became the last sighting of Faith alive by anyone besides her roommate. By 3:00 a.m., both girls were back inside the apartment. When investigators canvassed the complex looking for witnesses after the murder, they found a woman named Joy. In an interview with 2020, Joy said she lived in an apartment below Faith and Karina on the first floor. She told the investigators that she heard several loud noises coming from their apartment a little after 3:00 in the morning. When she was asked what the noises sounded like, she said, quote, "They sounded like it could have been a heavy book bag being dropped. It could have been an end table being turned over," end quote. But despite hearing the strange noises, she didn't go upstairs and check on the girls or call the Chapel Hill police. When investigators searched Faith's computer records after the murder, they learned that someone logged into Faith's Facebook account sometime after they got back to the apartment at 3 a.m. They were only logged in for a few minutes and then they logged out. However, it's unclear whether it was Faith, Karina, or someone else who logged on. A search of Faith's cell phone was also done. Investigators learned that at 3:40 a.m., Faith sent a text to a guy friend named Brandon Edwards. Brandon Edwards had once dated Karina. The text read, quote, "Hey B, can you come over here please? Karina needs you more, aha. You know. Please let her know you care," end quote. 3 minutes later, a second text was sent from Faith's phone. This time it was just a single word, "than." Later on, investigators said that they believed the second text message that said "than" was sent to correct the previous text message that said "aha." They thought Faith meant to say this, "Karina needs you more than you know," instead of "aha." Following these text messages, Faith's cell phone was never used again. This was at 3:40. Besides the text messages, phone records showed that Karina also called Brandon around the same time Faith texted him, but he didn't answer. A few minutes later, Karina texted her friend Jordan McCary. Jordan was a soccer player for the UNC soccer team and was a guy Karina was seeing at the time. At 4:25 a.m., Karina said she left the apartment and got inside Jordan's car, who was waiting downstairs. After he picked her up, the two headed to his apartment on West Longview Street in Chapel Hill. When investigators asked Karina if she remembered locking the front door behind her, she said she didn't think so. This meant that when Karina left to go to Jordan's apartment, she might have left the door unlocked while Faith was still inside. About 6.5 hours later, Karina tried calling Faith to see if she could come pick her up from Jordan's house, but she didn't answer. So she decided to call her friend Marisol Rangel to pick her up and take her back to the apartment. She said she didn't think anything about Faith not answering because she figured she was still asleep. They both had been out late the night before. So a little after 11 a.m., Karina and Marisol got to the apartment. They called out for Faith, but she didn't answer. So they went into the bedroom and found her. Faith's body was discovered on the bed inside the bedroom she shared with Karina. She was half naked and her body was wrapped in a bloody comforter. As soon as Chapel Hill detectives got to the apartment, they started collecting evidence. And the small one-bedroom apartment had a lot of it. Faith's body was wrapped in the comforter, almost completely soaked in blood. When they lifted the blanket, they saw a significant amount of blunt force trauma injuries to her head. Whoever killed her had used some type of heavy or sharp object to beat her over the head. But it wasn't only the blanket where detectives found evidence. There was blood spatter on the bed where the pillow was, and there was also blood spatter throughout the entire bedroom. Blood was practically everywhere, on the walls, the bedroom door, and even on the sides of the bed and the closet. A bloody, empty glass bottle of Bacardi peach rum was also found near Faith's body. This is the object detectives believed was used to beat and kill Faith. On the bed, detectives found a bizarre note inside a Time Out fast food bag, a popular 24-hour fast food restaurant in Chapel Hill. Inside the bag was a white piece of paper with the handwritten words, "I'm not stupid, bitch," and "jealous," written with a black ballpoint pen. Unlike many other parts of the bedroom and the bed, the bag had no blood on it. This seemed to suggest that it was placed there after the murder happened, or it was written beforehand. Another strange thing about the note was that it looked like it might have been written with someone's non-dominant hand, like if they were right-handed, but they wrote the note with their left. So the detectives wondered if this was the suspect's way of disguising their handwriting. When an autopsy was performed, investigators discovered she had also been sexually assaulted, and Faith had died from blunt force trauma to the head. The injuries to her head were consistent with the kind of marks a glass bottle would leave behind. Besides the injuries to her head, she also had a lot of bruises and cuts on her arms and legs. There was even blood found underneath her fingernails. All of this told detectives that Faith was in a fight for her life with her attacker that night. Based on when Karina left and came back to the apartment, they believed that she was murdered sometime between 4:25 a.m. and 11 a.m. All of this evidence seemed to tell a story about what might have happened. Investigators started throwing around the idea that sometime after Karina left the apartment to go to Jordan's house at 4:30 a.m., someone entered the apartment. Before she left, she said Faith was asleep in the bedroom. But since she couldn't remember if the door was locked or not when she left, someone probably simply walked into the apartment after she was gone. Maybe the killer was waiting outside and saw that if Karina left, Faith would be alone. Once her killer was inside, Faith was asleep in her bed, but was woken up by the intruder. Investigators believed that's when he sexually assaulted her and then used a bottle of rum to beat her over the head. He then wrapped her body in the comforter and left. But who was he? After the search warrant and investigative reports were made public, many wondered if Karina's ex-boyfriend, Eric Jones, could have had something to do with it. He was the only person the police identified as not liking Faith. She was the one who convinced Karina to break up with him and go get that restraining order. So there was a lot of bad blood between Faith and Jones. He had even posted a weird message on Facebook shortly before the murder. His Facebook said, quote, "Dear Lord, forgive me for all of my sins and the sins I may commit today. Protect me from the girls who don't deserve me and the ones who wish me dead today." End quote. But there was one big problem with him being the prime suspect. His DNA didn't match the DNA collected in Faith's rape kit or the DNA found on the empty rum bottle. So although he might have seemed like a good suspect in the beginning, the forensic evidence didn't match. When the records were unsealed about 18 months after the murder, the media finally got access to the original search warrant of Faith's apartment and the police records that supported them. Although most of the names were redacted, the public learned a lot about what was collected from the apartment, including the foreign male DNA, the empty rum bottle, and the searches done on Faith's phone, computer, and Facebook. But something else interesting was also released: the 911 call. In July 2014, the entire 7-minute 911 call from when Karina discovered the body was also released. And when the media got their hands on the tape, it led to even more speculation. Now, the entire 911 call is available online if you're interested in listening to it. I'm not going to play the entire phone call here, but let's listen to a small portion of it.
He's unconscious. I just walked in the apartment and there looks like there's blood everywhere.
Listen to me. Listen to me. Somebody's already sending the ambulance. Okay? I need to get some information from you, and I'm gonna help. I'm gonna tell you how to help her. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. How old is she?
She's 19.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't want to touch her, but
Listen to me. Is she breathing?
I don't know.
You need to check and see. Is she breathing?
Kate, I don't think so.
Okay, listen to me.
There's blood everywhere.
There's what?
There's blood everywhere.
Okay.
I don't know what happened.
Okay, is she on?
Again, that's only a small part of the call. The entire conversation was a little over 7 minutes. But as soon as this call was released to the media, it created a firestorm of speculation. The biggest news outlets to talk about the call was the News and Observer, a newspaper company based in Raleigh, North Carolina. And what they did was report on several parts of the 911 call that they found strange. The first was that it might not have been Faith's roommate, Karina Rosario, who was on the phone. Instead, they thought that it might have been her friend, Marisol, who dropped her off that morning. The News and Observer pointed out that throughout the call, the 911 dispatcher asked the caller for her name multiple times until she finally identified herself as Karina. The newspaper also points out that the caller kept saying her friend referring to Faith. She never mentioned Faith by name. She kept saying, "my friend." The caller also never told the dispatcher that Marisol was at the apartment with her. But the strangest thing about the 911 call was how reluctant the caller was to touch Faith's body. Throughout the call, 911 begged her to see if Faith had a pulse or was breathing. She asked her over and over again to get closer to the body to see if she might still be alive. They needed to know if she was still breathing or had a pulse before paramedics could get there. But over and over again, she seemed really reluctant to follow any of the dispatcher's instructions. This was something the News and Observer thought was strange. They argued that if it really was Karina on the other end of the phone, why didn't she want to touch her body? And why didn't she say that her friend Marisol was there? And if she was so afraid to touch the body, why didn't she ask her friend Marisol to do it? At some point during the investigation, one of Faith's friends turned over a strange voicemail to the police. A voicemail that seemingly captured one of Faith's last moments alive. Faith's friend came forward and told investigators that she left what sounded like a pocket dial voicemail on her cell phone the night she was killed. Initially, the friend said she deleted it because she thought that Faith had called her on accident, and she knew Faith was known to sometimes pocket dial people. So she deleted it and didn't think about it again until after she found out that Faith had been murdered. As soon as she heard the news, she thought about that weird voicemail message. So she called her cell phone service provider to see if they could recover the message. Since she deleted it, it was no longer on her phone. Luckily enough, the cell phone company recovered the message and sent her a copy of it. But when the friend contacted the Chapel Hill Police Department, they brushed her off. The investigators didn't think the message had anything to do with the case because of when it was timestamped. The voice message was timestamped at 1:23 a.m. This would have been around the time when Faith and Karina were still at the nightclub. So according to the detectives, this was several hours before she was attacked and killed. And if that's the case, the message didn't have anything to do with the investigation. So the police discounted it. But in 2016, 4 years after the murder, new and compelling information about the pocket dial was discovered. In 2016, the voicemail was sent to Arlo West, a forensic audio expert, to see if he could uncover anything from the message. For the first 4 years of the investigation, the message was never tested. And according to Arlo West, he did find something in the message that might help the investigation. Although the audio is really staticky and everything sounds distorted, he heard something strange after he enhanced the audio using special equipment. There were 4 voices heard in the message, 2 male voices and 2 female voices. According to the forensic audio expert, the first female can be heard saying, quote, "Ow, my head, ow. Help me, get off me." The second female then said, "Do it." Seconds later, the first male said, "I think she's dying. Do it anyway." The forensic expert also said he heard the second female threatening the first female by saying, quote, "Fuck you. I'm pissed. I'm going to kick your face, bitch. I figured out that bullshit. You liar. You intentionally lied." It went on for a little bit longer, but probably the most chilling part that can be heard on the video came toward the end of the message. According to the audio expert, one of the male voices could be heard saying, "I can't believe that you really did it, Rosie." And the second female replied, "Go get help, Eric." What's chilling about that statement is that the audio expert wondered if Rosie was short for Karina Rosario, Faith's roommate and friend who was with her earlier that night. And Eric was her ex-boyfriend, Eric Jones. Everything the forensic audio expert uncovered from the messages was turned over to the police, but they stood their ground. They didn't think the message had anything to do with Faith's murder simply by the timestamp. Remember, it was recorded at 1:23 a.m., much earlier than the assault and murder occurred. And besides that, they didn't have any other evidence suggesting Karina or her ex-boyfriend Eric Jones had anything to do with the murder. Eric's DNA didn't match the evidence collected from the crime scene or Faith's rape kit. But the forensic audio expert disagreed. He argued the timestamp on the message could have been wrong. Sometimes cell phone towers can be glitchy and report inaccurate timestamps on phone calls and text messages. So in his opinion, the timestamp could have been wrong, which meant the message could have actually been left at the exact moment that Faith was being attacked. Later that year, in September 2016, the suspect's DNA was sent to Parabon Nanolabs, a private lab in Virginia that specializes in DNA phenotyping, a way of predicting someone's physical appearance through their DNA. Parabon Nanolabs used the DNA collected from Faith's body and the scene to create a 3D image of what they believed her killer could look like. This image was based on his unique physical traits obtained from the DNA. According to Parabon Nanolabs, the killer was, quote, very strongly Native American and European mixed ancestry or Latino, end quote. They said it was a good chance he or his family was from Mexico, Colombia, or some other South American country. And there was an 80% chance he had olive skin tone, little to no freckles, and black hair. The only thing the lab couldn't determine from the DNA was his height, weight, or age at the time of the murder. Once they had the image, it was circulated nationally and locally across many news stations. They hoped the image was good enough for someone to come forward and say they recognized it. But it wasn't. That particular image could have matched thousands, if not millions of people. So although the DNA phenotyping might have been a good investigative tool, it didn't identify Faith's killer. Faith's murder remained unsolved for the next 10 years. Although investigators had the suspect's DNA, it wasn't a match to anyone in the database. In total, they had collected the killer's DNA on 52 separate pieces of evidence collected at the scene, but they couldn't find a match for anyone. Although several potential suspects popped up over the years, including Faith's roommate Karina and her ex-boyfriend Eric Jones, no one was ever arrested. And for almost a decade, Faith's family and the community of Chapel Hill wondered if the case would ever be solved. Was a vicious killer still walking the streets? One of the most popular theories was that Faith probably knew her killer. People thought maybe it was someone she went to school with or someone she worked with at the Red Robin restaurant. But over the years, investigators spoke with almost everyone who knew Faith. They conducted over 2,000 interviews and collected over 750 DNA samples. All were cleared. But there was always the possibility Faith's killer was someone outside her immediate circle. Maybe it was someone she knew, and maybe they had even met once or twice. But the police had no idea they existed. The answer to these questions would remain elusive for over a decade. On August 16th, 2021, investigators finally got the break they desperately sought. On August 16th, 2021, 28-year-old Miguel Seguero Olivares was pulled over in Raleigh, North Carolina, on suspicion of driving under the influence. As part of his arrest for DUI, he was required to submit a DNA sample. A few days later, on September 7th, a North Carolina judge issued a warrant for Miguel's arrest. He was scheduled to be in court for his DUI arrest but never showed up, so a warrant was issued. A few days later, his DNA that was collected at the time of his DUI was uploaded to the DNA database. Authorities in Chapel Hill were alerted about a possible match in their Faith Hedgepeth investigation. On September 14th, 2021, investigators learned that the DNA collected in Faith's murder case matched someone recently uploaded to the database. The match was for Miguel Olivares. 2 days later, on September 16th, Chapel Hill authorities announced that they had made an arrest in Faith's case. They said Miguel's DNA from the traffic stop matched the foreign DNA collected at the murder scene. They also said his fingerprints matched a palm print found on the murder weapon, the empty glass bottle of rum. Immediately after his arrest, authorities searched his house in Durham. They wanted to see if he kept anything about the murder, like a trophy or newspaper clippings about the case. But it's unclear whether anything connected to the murder was ever found. Miguel Olivares is currently being held in the Durham County Jail without bond. He has pleaded not guilty to the murder and is currently awaiting trial. Investigators haven't said whether they've identified a motive or not. And they haven't said how Faith and Miguel knew each other or if they did it all. All that's been released through court documents is that Miguel's DNA was found in several key places, including Faith's rape kit, the murder weapon, and the strange note on her bed. According to investigators, no one else's DNA was found at the scene, only that of Faith's killer. After almost a decade, the person believed to be responsible for the murder of Faith Hedgepeth is finally behind bars. Durham County prosecutors and investigators are confident they have enough forensic evidence to secure a first-degree murder charge in the case. But even with all the forensic evidence, there is still so much we don't know. Did Faith and her killer know each other? What did the bizarre note mean? Was her killer simply trying to throw investigators off, or did it mean something to him? Then there are questions about whether other people were involved. The forensic expert who studied the pocket dial voicemail that Faith left on her friend's cell phone said that he heard 4 voices on it, 2 male and 2 female voices. Are there other potential suspects out there? We may have to wait until this case goes to trial to finally discover the truth. Faith's legacy lives on through the Faith Smile Scholarship. The program was started by her family and is funded through donations. The Faith Smile Scholarship was created to provide scholarship money to Indigenous women pursuing college degrees. 2 $1,000 scholarships are awarded each year on Faith's birthday, September 26. To date, the program has awarded more than 20 scholarships in Faith's memory. One of the recipients was Taylor Williams. Taylor grew up in the same Hollister community that Faith grew up in. Another recipient was Zian Richardson. Zian told CBS 17 News, quote, "I sort of saw myself in the legacy she left behind. So wanting to help her people. Kindness to others, a big heart, a bright personality, and just to have a scholarship award in the honor of someone like that, it was a very humbling thing for me." End quote. To share your thoughts on this week's story, be sure to follow the show on Instagram and Facebook. To find out what I think about the case, sign up to become a patron at patreon.com/forensictales. After each episode, I release a bonus episode where I share my personal thoughts and opinions about the case. Don't forget to subscribe to Forensic Tales so you don't miss an episode. We release a new episode every Monday. If you love the show, consider leaving us a positive review or tell friends and family about us. You can also help support the show through Patreon. Thank you so much for joining me this week. Please join me next week. We'll have a brand new case and a brand new story to talk about. Until then, remember, not all stories have happy endings. Forensic Tales is a Rockefeller audio production. The show is written and produced by me, Courtney Fretwell Areola. For a small monthly contribution, you can help create new compelling cases for the show, help fund research, and assist with production and editing costs. For supporting the show, you'll become one of the first to listen to new ad-free episodes and snag exclusive show merchandise not available anywhere else. To learn about how you can support this show, head over to our Patreon page, patreon.com/forensictales, or simply click the support link in the show notes. You can also support this show by leaving a positive review or telling friends and family about us. Forensic Tales is a podcast made possible by our Patreon producers, Tony A., Nicole L., David B., Paula G., Nicole G., Christine B., Karen D., Sherry A., Elizabeth M., Lisa S., Nicola, Laura, Roberto R., Jerry, Gary M., and Brian W. If you'd like to become a producer of the show, head over to our Patreon page or send me an email at Courtney@forensictales.com to find out how you can become involved. For a complete list of sources used in this episode, please visit forensictales.com. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next week. Until then, remember, not all stories have happy endings.